My name's Rich Lambert, and I'm the creative director on ESO.
So, Rich, you're coming out with Greymoor. It's a brand new expansion for ESO. We talked about it a little bit yesterday in your presentation, but you're adding so much to the game. Talk a little about like your new archaeology thing that you're adding. You called it Indiana Jones meets Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, antiquities.
Antiquities.
Yep. So it is very much a alternate way to play ESO. It's all about tracking down the location of interesting lore-related articles and items in Tamriel. And it is game-wide, so it's not just in the Greymoor chapter, it's all throughout the base game as well. And essentially what you're doing is, kind of playing Indiana Jones, doing the research, trying to figure things out, playing some new mini games in scrying and digging, and getting cool loot. It's a pretty cool system.
There's also like so talk about the mini game itself, because there is, you called it Minesweeper meets Minesweeper meets something else. Battleship,
yeah,
right?
Minesweeper means Battleship. That's the digging mini game. And so that is essentially a little bit more of a mundane task. And I don't mean that in the negative sense. I mean that it's more grounded in the world. So you actually go to a site and you set up a little archaeological dig site where you have a number of abilities that you can use to dig up these objects. And then you also have this ability called radar sense, where you use it to help identify where an object might be in the dirt. And then once you've found that, that's when you start to dig it up. The other mini game that we have is called Scrying, and that is more of a magical experience where you're using an alien device called the Antiquarian's Eye to scry locations to where the object might be buried. And that is more of a shape matching game where you're going through and matching similar icons throughout the board, trying to fill the board out and collect all the clues.
Now, is that something that's Antiquities? Is that going to be something worldwide, or is that going to be exclusive for Greymoor for now?
So you have to go to Greymoor and join the guild in Solitude. So you have to have Greymoor. But once you have joined it, you can go anywhere in the world and do the scrying and digging.
Oh, awesome. And then also talk a little about, you're introducing new biomes and environments that are very gothic in nature. Talk about how you went to decide to go in that direction creatively.
Well, so a lot of the tone and feel for the overall story this year is this dark, kind of sinister feel. And we wanted the biomes to try and match that. And so we've got Skyrim, Western Skyrim, which is already kind of very gritty and hardy. It being this very wintry kind of feel and biome. But then we also have Blackreach, which is the giant underground cavern below Skyrim. And that's where we really started to dig into the gothic tone and gothic feel. Because there's a lot of that space that's never before been explored. And so we went down in there and started pushing in that direction and starting to really figure out what is down here under in this giant underground cavern. And there might be some vampires down there.
Yeah, and speaking of vampires, you guys have also kind of elaborated or expanded more on the werewolf and vampire aspect of this expansion by giving them kind of their time to shine in a sense. Can you talk about how you're changing certain spells and certain things that have to do with those particular skill lines?
Yeah. Works.
Yeah.
So specifically with vampire, because the story of Greymoor and the Dark Heart of Skyrim is so focused on the vampire, we wanted to make sure that the skill line felt like a real vampire experience rather than kind of what it is on live right now. So we went back and we reworked a bunch of the active abilities. There's a new ultimate ability that actually turns you into a different form, which is cool. We adjusted the passives, and then we also looked at the overall feeding mechanics and vampire experience. And so now, when the way you become more powerful as a vampire is to feed. And so because you're going to be feeding more often, we upgraded that experience, that overall feeding mechanic, so that now it uses the same paired animation system that the Dark Brotherhood uses with its Blade of Woe. So now you get these really cool, vampire bite scenes when you're biting people and feeding on them that feels much more like you are a vampire.
So, working on an MMO is a pretty daunting task, especially for getting a new player base into it, because they can be so complicated and intimidating. What are you doing for players that have never played ESO that will help them to learn how to play it in Greymoor specifically, if you're doing anything?
Well, we have a brand new tutorial. So one of the things that we always do in our chapters is, because this is kind of a really big tentpole moment and we attract tons of new players to the game for these, we create a specific tutorial for it that is focused on the story of Darkheart and of Greymoor, and then also teaches you the base mechanics of combat and whatnot to help get you into the game quicker and learn more about the game.
And then you also have a new trial. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it is called Kind's Aegis. It is a 12-player trial. It is meant for more of our veteran player base. It's something they look forward to every year, is getting some new candy, new loot, and new items to go and chase. And the story of the trial is centered around giants and this vampire lord that is leading the sea giants. And ultimately, you are going to figure out why they're there and how it ties into the overall storyline. But the trial itself is kind of similar in size and scope to Sunspire, which was the trial we introduced in Elsewhere, in that it's got 3 main bosses, has base op and bannerman and really cool mechanics. But we've taken some feedback from the previous trials and incorporated that into this trial. It's a little bit more linear in fashion. We kind of went back to our roots from Mauve Lorcash, and that afforded, it just made the trial a little bit easier to navigate for players, but B, it allows us to really create interesting, cool new spaces and really set up vistas better, because we know exactly which way players are going to come into them. So players are going to have really cool new mechanics and new ways to kind of participate in the trial now that they haven't necessarily had before.
Now, you said that you guys have taken a real big leap into the storytelling to your game the last few years. You've actually expanded that exponentially. When you start a new expansion, like for Greymoor, for example, do you start with the story and build game mechanics around that, or do you start with the mechanics first and then see what fits best in the story?
We always start at the biome and the story level first. We do that mainly because we're looking at themes and tones first, to make sure that what we're doing in this chapter feels different than what we've done in previous chapters. We never want to repeat ourselves, because as soon as you start repeating yourselves, players start to get bored. And so we focus on that first, and then we start to layer in the mechanics, as you say, or the side stories as well.
So one of the most requested features of your game has been crossplay with Xbox, PS4, and PC. Is that anything you guys are currently discussing? Is it something that you guys have discussed or plan to do eventually?
It is something that we get asked a lot about. Got asked a lot about it last year. And it's a very difficult problem to solve. We've been working on ESO. I've been working on ESO for 13 years now. We never really built the game to do any of that kind of stuff. And so there's lots of challenges. How do you integrate 6 different realms into one realm now that have their own unique ecosystems and own unique economies? So that's where a lot of the discussion is kind of centered around. I don't know that we can say we will ever do it or not, but it's definitely something that we talk about a lot. And how would we do it if we could do it?
If it's too complicated, would you also be open to something a little less complex, say like cross-save integration, where I could play on my PC, then jump on my Xbox and continue my journey as the same character?
So cross-saves aren't really, that's not really how the game works. There's a database and everything goes to that database.
Okay.
It's not a save it on your local machine and then put it in the cloud and go somewhere else. Like that is just as complicated as doing, the cross-platform stuff.
All right, and then one of the cool things is you guys actually have a physical collector's edition you're releasing with this as well. It comes with a really cool vampire statue and like coins from the Elder Scrolls universe, which is awesome. Did you guys have when do you guys decide to make physical collector editions like that? If you have any input at that at all, or is that somebody else's decision?
Yeah, we have a lot of input on that, and one of the reasons why we did the collector's edition this year was because players really demanded it. They were like, "Hey, we were really upset you didn't do one last year," and we tried to do something a little different. And the idea was we wouldn't necessarily we didn't want to punish our most loyal customers by having them have to rebuy the game every time, and so we tried to just do cool unique objects over the course of the year, and that was pretty successful. But players really wanted that collector's edition, and so we did that this year, and we had a lot of fun coming up with what we could put in here, and I think it turned out awesome.
You've been working on ESO for over 13 years, and over that time we've seen technology improve exponentially. How does that affect how does that affect your design process? What does it open up for you creatively, and is it hard implementing new technology into an MMO because you do have to maintain that consistency, that the base code's got to be the base code, you can't just wipe it and start over?
Yeah, I mean, you always have to worry about lowest common denominator, right? What is the hardware that most people have, and make sure that you support that. And then you start looking into, okay, well, what does DirectX 12 mean? What does this new video card mean? What does these new 30 core processors mean, right? Like all of those things. And that's the process that you've seen with like our performance improvement roadmap. That's shaken out due to a lot of the newer technologies coming in there. More people have multiple core systems now, so it makes sense to really start to double down on getting multi-threaded technology up and running and working, and we've never really had that, so it's a huge amount of work, and so we have to kind of prioritize what we should and shouldn't do and what we can and can't do based on that.
Now, I know you can't talk much about it, but this year we're getting our new console cycle. We're getting the Xbox Series X and the PS5. Would the console versions of ESO have a visual improvement on top of that with the new console? Is that something that's planned, or is it going to be basically kind of the same on the Xbox One X until later down the line where you guys obviously have more of a grip on the new technology and can improve it, frame rates, draw distance, textures, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're not talking too much about it. We know that people are going to want ESO to be on there.
Right.
That's about as much as I'll say. But the hardware looks pretty cool, that's for sure.
Awesome. And when can we get our hands on Greymoor and start exploring and killing vampires or become one?
So, in January, at Announce, I think we said towards the end of May for PC and the beginning of June for console. I don't know how that will be impacted based on everybody working from home at this point, but that's kind of what the dates are. So we'll kind of see where that stuff shakes out as we know more about working from home and whatnot.